Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. Today it's just John, talking mock drafts, as it is Thursday morning, the day of the opening round of the NFL draft. Still a lot to get to. Austin, as we already know from our last podcast, released his mock draft. I'll be going over that very briefly. And I'll be touching about the draft tonight, and I'll be releasing my mock draft for the Steelers and a full round one mock draft. So without any hesitation, why don't we just jump right into it? So first things first, we've got to talk about the guys who visited the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm not going to list all of these guys because the Steelers brought in 30 pre-draft visitors and 3 guys locally that don't count against that 30 visit count. Just guys that you might want to pay attention to as guys that could be drafted A or B, guys that could be added as undrafted free agents, such as, a Greg Gilmore from last season. So without further ado, I'm going to just give a brief overview of the list. Some of these guys we looked at, some of them we didn't. Some names to pay attention to that I'm going to really be looking at, though, are Damian Harris, a running back from Alabama. There's, of course, Jordan Scarlett, who Austin looked at running back. There's also Foster Moreau, the tight end from LSU, Miles Boykin from Notre Dame, not to mention Ben Banigou, the outside linebacker from TCU, Andrew Van Ginkel from Wisconsin, another outside linebacker / edge guy. And then you've got a few other guys that could be in play in the first couple rounds, like safety Darnell Savage, cornerback Justin Lane, and cornerback Rock Ya-Sin. So a handful of guys here that are interesting. The 30 visitors, you saw a lot of cornerbacks, a handful of edge guys. You saw a few wide receivers, 5 running backs, let me count this actually. 7 running backs, so it's a lot of running backs too. And then they had a few local visits as well. They also had a pro day dinner with Chase Winovich back last month as well. And then they had 3 private workouts with safety Mike Edwards from Kentucky and receivers Gary Jennings Jr. from West Virginia and N'Keal Harry from Arizona State. So for months now, since the Steelers' 2018 season wrapped up and the ensuing losses in free agency and via trade for Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, respectively, I think it's safe to say that the Steelers' biggest needs on the team right now are an inside linebacker, still looking to fill the void that Ryan Shazier left. You've got edge rusher, where right now the Steelers have their starters in place in Bud Dupree and TJ Watt, but not a lot of depth. And of course the question marks regarding Bud Dupree in his final season coming up without a contract extension. So you could stand to add a guy there. You've got wide receiver, where, again, the departure of Brown leaves a huge hole in the offense. And then cornerback, where the Steelers really struggled last season. Those are my top needs. I have another tier of wants. I have several wants where I feel like the Steelers could and probably should address the position, but it's not necessarily mandatory. So it's most of the rest. It's tight end, where you lose Jesse James, need a number 2. You got safety, where Sean Davis is in the last year of his contract and has not been extended. You have defensive line, where I feel like you could always add more to a group that is aging. You've got running back, where the Steelers seem to be very interested in running backs in this year's draft class. So I would assume that's a want. Perhaps interior offensive line with that group aging as well, and maybe kicker with Chris Boswell's struggling performance last season. As far as what's not needed, I think it's pretty clear quarterback is not a need. Punter really isn't a need either. Neither is long snapper. I suppose tackle could be, but I don't think it's needed at all. I think you've got your guys in place there. So now, what prospects have been linked to the Steelers for pick number 20? 2 days ago, I had just 5 guys, but now I have 7. So first and foremost, you've got Devin Bush. We already know Devin Bush is the guy that the Steelers probably most covet, and the guy that would fill the biggest need at a high value level. Devin Bush looks like a guy that could be a star in this league, and he is a bit undersized, but I think he would fit a need and he'd be effective with what the Steelers would ask him to do. Second, there's Greedy Williams. a cornerback who is a bit of a trend breaker for what the Steelers typically look for in a cornerback, but there's no doubt he's a playmaker. He's a guy that has been linked. I like that as well. Byron Murphy, another cornerback who is a likely target for the Pittsburgh Steelers if he's still on the board at 20. Another playmaker, a bit undersized, but he's a solid player. Next is Darnell Savage. This is the first kind of interesting look at a potential reach. Now, Savage is a good player, but he's projected to be a top 40 guy, which means if he's taken in the first round as a top 40 guy, that means a team wanted him bad enough in the later end of round 1 that they felt like they would take him then because he wouldn't be around in the late end of round 2. Next is Noah Fant, who I've seen mocked to the Steelers a couple times. I just don't see it. I don't think Noah Fant should be a round 1 guy. He is a really athletic tight end, but he's not a very good blocker, and I don't like the fact that he drops a lot of passes. Next, I have Mack Wilson. This name has faded in recent weeks as his inconsistencies have kind of been brought to the forefront. I think Mack Wilson would be more of a round 2 target, not a round 1 target at this point. Although I do understand the Steelers' interest in him, I would kind of hope that the Steelers don't take him in round 1. I think he is either him or this next guy are going to be the lowest rated potential first round picks for the Steelers if they do take these guys at 20. And the next guy is the guy that's kind of emerged the last couple of days, and that's Rock Ya-Sin from Temple. I think he's a decent player, but not a round 1 guy. And quite frankly, I'd be disappointed if the Steelers took him. I don't see it at all, and I'm not looking for that. So, if the Steelers want to get Devin Bush, it's becoming more and more apparent that they're going to need to trade up to get him. So, let's talk about trading up first. Last year, you might remember they attempted to trade up in order to get Rashaan Evans, but they failed to find a trade partner, and it resulted in all 4 of the capable round 1 inside linebackers being off the board when the Steelers selected. I think that a year removed from this, the Steelers kind of know that they need to do something different in addressing the inside linebacker position. They didn't really have a plan after those guys were picked last year. Devin Bush is clearly the darling favorite here for the Steelers, and I think they are strongly considering moving up to get him, since I think falling to pick number 20 is unlikely. But how much are they going to move up? How much should they move up, and how much would it cost? Those are the important questions to ask. If the Steelers do not move up in the first round, I almost guarantee it to happen sometime during the rest of the draft. You think about it, the Steelers have 10 draft picks. Rarely does a team spend all 10 of its draft picks in a given year. That's just a lot of guys to bring into an NFL training camp. And you think about it, the Steelers already have, I think it's 74 or 76 players on the team. So if you're adding 10 draft picks, that's leaving you only 5 extra roster spots roughly for undrafted free agents. And the Steelers like to bring in around 10. So I just don't think the Steelers are going to draft 10 players in this draft. I won't rule out them picking up 8 or 9, but I think 10 is unlikely. So I would expect to trade up at some point in this draft, if not more than once. Trading down, a little more unlikely. Since the Kevin Colbert era started in the year 2000, the Steelers have traded down just one time in the first round, and it was his first draft in 2001 for Casey Hampton. Add into account the fact the Steelers have 10 picks now, I don't see the Steelers trading back to get more, unless, of course, if they trade up earlier in the draft, and then it always depends on the board and what the Steelers are looking for at that point. I won't rule it out, but trading up seems far more likely at this juncture. So now, let's talk about mock drafts, and I know Austin talked to you guys about his mock draft earlier in our last episode, but I'm going to go over it a little bit and just kind of discuss it briefly because this is the official mock draft episode, so I figured it'd be responsible of me to put both his and mine in there. So let's start with the first pick at round 1, pick number 20 is Devin Bush, and he needs no introduction at this point. Bush is a guy that has been connected to the Steelers for a while, and if he drops to 20, I think he's a great selection, and I think he'd be a perfect fit in the defense right away. Second round at pick 52 is Juan Thornhill from Virginia, it's Juan Thornhill. My apologies. Thornhill's a really interesting playmaker at Virginia. He's a guy that I really like, and I think Austin really liked too. He looks like a really great player, but injury concerns and the fact that he didn't seem to have much interest from the Steelers make me hesitate to think he's going to be picked at this point. I would not hate this pick though in the second round though if he manages to last that long. That would be nice to see. I would like to see Juan Thornhill come to Pittsburgh. Third, Austin has the first third round pick number 66, is cornerback Trayvon Mullen from Clemson. Now that's a third straight defensive player, which to be honest with you, the Steelers do need a lot of help on defense. I don't know that they'll go 3 straight picks to start on defense, but I mean it'd be hard arguing against that as far as what the Steelers need. I don't know a ton about Mullen, but if he is around, it's a position of need, and I think it's something that the Steelers desperately need at cornerback. Even though he might not play right away, that's not necessarily a bad thing. At pick number 83 in the third round, the second of 2 third-round picks, Austin has the Steelers taking David Sills from West Virginia. Sills, if you're going to have one of 2 receivers mocked to the Steelers, it's going to be either Miles Boykin or David Sills. Sills has the lesser upside compared to Boykin, but he has far more production, and it seems like you're going to know what you're going to get from him more than you're going to get from Boykin. So Sills is a good player, and you're not going to need him to contribute a lot early on, so that's not a bad pick either. Fourth round, pick number 122, Austin has the Steelers going offense again, and Drew Sample, the tight end from Washington. Again, the Steelers need to replace Jesse James, and Sample is a guy that can help with that. I don't know a ton about Drew Sample because another one of the prospects Austin looked at. So far, he's looked at Thornhill, Mullen, Sills, Sample, and I've only looked at his first-round pick selection, Devin Bush. So, again, Austin knows more about these guys than I do, but, again, it's another position where you're not drafting too high for a tight end, but you can get some production and some playing time from a guy like Sample, who is likely to replace Jesse James in that situation. With the 5th round pick at number 141 overall, Austin has edge rusher Ben Banigou from TCU. I like this pick. I've seen Banigou mocked to the Steelers several times over the past couple weeks in the mid to later rounds, and I'm a fan. I think that he would be a good ad for the Steelers, and I think Austin mentioned it on the podcast, but the last time the Steelers picked a player from TCU, they hadn't won a Super Bowl yet. It's a long time, 1974. So the NFL was a lot different back then, but I think it's certainly possible that streak ends in the next couple days. With the first of 3 sixth-round picks, Austin goes back to the offensive side of the ball, and he takes Bryce Love with pick number 175 from Stanford. Bryce Love, a guy I looked at, a smaller guy who's been injured, but has the ability to break a play from anywhere on the field. He's a very electric type of player, a home run hitter, and he's not going to carry the ball 30 times in a game, but he'd be a really nice change of pace back from the James Connors and James Samuels of the world. So I like that pick as well. The second sixth-round pick at 192, Austin has the Steelers addressing defensive line and improving the depth there by adding Michael Dogby from Temple. Another player I looked at. Dogby was an interesting player. He doesn't really project with much upside, but when you're picking players that late, you're either looking for special teams guys that can be good depth players, or guys that have high upside but very little production, so there's a question mark as far as will they get there. I do like Dogby as the pick there. I think he could be a situational pass rusher, and he's versatile. That's the key there, is that he can be an interchangeable guy on the outside at the edge, or he can play as the 5-tech as well. So he can move from inside to outside as a defensive lineman or edge player too. So that's nice to see. With the final sixth-round pick at 207, Austin has the Steelers going to offensive line and Bo Benshaw from Wisconsin. Benshaw was a big guy. I'm trying to remember what I said about him because this was very early on in the process. I should have refreshed my memory here. I apologize for that, but let's think about it. The offensive line, especially the interior offensive line, they're getting older. And even though B.J. Finney is looking like the eventual replacement to Ramon Foster at the end of his contract, you still got David DeCastro, who will be approaching age 30 at that time. and you'll have Marquise Pouncey likely retiring at the end of his contract because that's also when Ben Roethlisberger's is up. So you have to think they're both going to leave at the same time. And you got to at least start thinking about adding some depth, at least a guy that could be potentially a swing guy. And Ben Shaw, a tall pass blocking specialist, I'm reading his profile from NFL.com. He's going to need to prove that he can be serviceable against NFL power in the run game to become a future star. Ben Shaw plays with good technique and an understanding of blocking concepts in the run game. He might lack the play strength at the point of attack. Okay. So he's a guy that could be a high upside offensive guard. He has a chance to become a starter. So yeah, I like that. And he's 6'6", so that's not something to scoff at either. If he's around that late in the draft, yeah, you take him. I like that. I like that pick a lot. And then with the last pick, Justin has the Steelers taking Justin Hollins from Oregon, an edge player. Now, you think about that, the Steelers haven't had a ton of success in drafting edge guys. So I like the fact that the Steelers double dip here. They did get TJ Watt in the first round a couple of years ago. But you think about Keon Adams, you think about Bud Dupree, Jarvis Jones, they haven't had a ton of success. So why not double dip and give yourself a chance to maybe find a diamond in the rough in Justin Hollins? And I like this pick. And he's a good athlete. So, you never know when you do get a player like that. So that was Austin's mock draft. And what do you think about it? Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with his picks? Let us know what you think. And obviously we'll be comparing it as time goes on with the way the actual draft goes. So now let's shift to my mock drafts. I did 2 this year. Just like last year, I did a Steelers one, and I did a full round 1 draft for the NFL. So to break things up here, I'm going to start with the entire round 1 mock draft. So because trades are almost impossible to predict, and usually if you do predict them, they're not going to be right, I'm just going to stick with the way things are and involve no trades at all. So straight from the Cardinals through the Patriots, that's how I have it going. Even though, that's not how it's going to go. But regardless, now that you know that, I'm not going to try to spend a ton of time on these guys, but I want to make sure you understand why I have who I have, where I have them. So let's kick it off. Cardinals, I have them taking Kyler Murray. I know there were reports coming out that the Cardinals were moving away from him, but I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I don't know that the Cardinals know what they're doing, but at the end of the day, the shiny new quarterback prospect is an attractive offer, and it seems like Josh Rosen is just a lame duck guy at this point. I mean, not having him in your hype video is just way too telling. If you're trying to make it seem like you're taking Kyler to get teams to trade up to try to get him, that seems like overboard, especially not telling Josh Rosen that, because it doesn't seem like he knows. So I think he's out. I think he's on his way out, and Kyler Murray's on his way in. The 49ers at number 2, I have taking Nick Bosa, in my opinion, the best overall player from this draft. Seemingly limitless potential as a fearsome pass rusher, and the pedigree of his brother Joey being a Pro Bowl player himself. Bosa will dramatically improve the Niners' defense immediately. In my opinion, the second best player in the draft, Quinnen Williams, going to the Jets from Alabama, the defensive tackle, is massive, he's talented, and he's going to fortify and improving a struggling Jets defense from last season. He's going to become a stalwart in the middle of that defense for years to come. Sticking with more defense for the 4th pick in Ed Oliver, the Raiders seem primed to make a surprise pick at number 4, and John Gruden's always a wild card. I have no idea what they're going to do. I think they could take a quarterback. But I'm actually going to go with Ed Oliver here because I think Gruden and Mayock see a lot of Aaron Donald in Oliver, and after watching football games from the booth or set for years for both of them, they're not going to want to pass up on a guy that could be the next version of Aaron Donald, even if he's not as good as him, obviously. He'll be too hard to pass up. The 5th pick, I have Devin White going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to need to find someone to replace the hole left by Quan Alexander in free agency. White is an athletic freak who, despite his shaky tape that what I've seen and Austin has seen and hammered home, his upside as a fantastic athlete will be too hard for teams to ignore that are desperate to fortify the middle of their defense. The Giants at number 6, they're desperate for a pass rusher. Look, last year the Giants had just 30 sacks on a team, and they traded their top pass rusher in Olivier Vernon. I'd have to think that general manager Dave Gettleman is desperate to add a pass rusher here, and with one of the best in Josh Allen falling to them, they're not going to hesitate to scoop him up. 7, this one seems like a match made in heaven. Juwan Taylor from Florida. Look, after the Jaguars broke the bank to sign their new prize quarterback Nick Foles, the Jaguars would and should be smart to invest in protecting him, and Taylor looks like a guy that could start in this league for a long time as either the blind side or the right tackle. At number 8, Will's not going to be happy with me, my roommate who's a Lions fan. The last time they took a tight end in the first round and Eric Ebron, it didn't exactly pan out. But I have them taking another one in TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson was one of my favorite players in the draft, and he's immediately going to make the offense better for the Lions. He's a reliable receiver in the short and intermediate passing game, and he's an asset as a blocker in the ground game. So keep your head up, Will, if they take TJ Hawkinson. He's a good player. At number 9, I have the Bills taking Brian Burns, the edge rusher from Florida State. The Bills signed 4 offensive linemen in free agency this year. I believe that this investment will into the offensive line will mean they won't address it in the draft, at least early. Instead, they'll add to their pass rush, drafting one of the most athletic and intriguing edge rusher prospects in this year's draft. Number 10, I have the Broncos taking Drew Lock. I don't really know what John Elway's thinking here. I could see them taking a tight end. I could see them taking a quarterback. I don't really know what Elway's thinking here. I'm just assuming he's going to decide to go with his guy at quarterback and Drew Lock, and he's just going to ride and die with him. That's just kind of what I think. I don't have a ton on it. 11th, I have the Bengals taking Dwayne Haskins, the quarterback from Ohio State. With the new coach at the helm, I think the Bengals are going to be looking to start over in the near future at quarterback. With Haskins falling to them, that's a guy that could be their guy for a decade plus in time. Number 12, I have the Green Bay Packers taking Devin Bush. And yes, that is sad for Steelers fans like myself, but the Packers need a guy to patrol the middle of their young defense to pair with Blake Martinez. He's a great athlete. That's hard to come by, and the Packers will halt his fall here. At number 11, the Dolphins, already too deep in the draft to get one of the top quarterback prospects, are going to decide to draft the future protector to their future quarterback that they'll draft with the number 1 overall pick next year in Andre Dillard from Washington State. 14th, I have the Falcons taking defensive tackle Christian Wilkins. They really struggled at defending the run, especially up the middle last season, and they weren't really a pass rushing threat either. So Christian Wilkins from the best defensive line in college football at Clemson, he makes sense here. I like that pairing right there. At 15, I have the Redskins taking top wide receiver DK Metcalf. They need a perimeter player, the Redskins do, and Metcalf is thought to be one of, if not the best receivers in the draft this year. He'll help to offset the loss of Jamison Crowder in free agency. At 16, I have the Panthers taking Rashawn Gary from Michigan. The edge rusher was previously thought to be a top 10 pick, but after news of a shoulder labrum issue, he's been falling down draft boards a little bit. Couple that with his lack of production in college, I still think the Panthers will be happy to take him as a guy who was once thought to be a top 10 pick at number 16. At number 17, I have the Giants taking quarterback Daniel Jones from Duke. Look, the Giants finally selected the heir to Eli Manning here, and it's a guy that surprisingly was not really hyped much at all until the last couple weeks. I thought at best he was going to be a late first-round pick, but with his stock rising, the Giants are going to pounce on him when they see he's gotten this far. When he will take over for Eli Manning, that's the next question, though. Last year, the Minnesota Vikings realized that when Kirk Cousins is under pressure, he struggles. So they're going to draft Jonah Williams from Alabama to help protect him and make that huge investment look a little bit better. At 19, I have the Titans taking Montez Sweat. The guy who killed it at the NFL Combine has been sliding down boards because of a heart condition, but his production and insane athleticism is going to be too hard to pass up at number 19, so Montez Sweat to the Titans. Pick number 20, what do the Pittsburgh Steelers take? They take Greedy Williams, a cornerback from LSU. With both Devin Bush and Devin White gone, the Steelers are going to take a trend breaker for them and Greedy Williams at cornerback. A big cornerback, but not a zone specialist that is physical either. Instead, a press man playmaker that doesn't like to get involved in the run game. I think Williams will give the back end of the Steelers defense something it didn't have for the most part last year, and that is the threat to take the ball away. At 21, I have the Seahawks taking edge rusher Cleveland Farrell from Clemson. The Seahawks are going to be looking to replace pass rusher Frank Clark, who was just traded to the Chiefs, and Farrell will fit in and start right away for the Seahawks. At 22, the Baltimore Ravens are going to say, screw that, we don't need a receiver. We're just going to keep drafting guys to run the football. So they're going to improve an already solid offensive line by drafting Cody Ford from Oklahoma. The Ravens, hell-bent on running the wing T offense, are going to say, forget the receiver, let's just bully up on everybody. 23, the Texans, I have them taking Byron Murphy. With all the top offensive linemen taken to this point in the draft, the Texans are going to delve into the cornerback position and add a top playmaker in Murphy, who, despite the size concerns, looks like a good player in this league. The Oakland Raiders' second pick in the first round at 24, I have them taking the first running back in this draft in Joshua Jacobs from Alabama. They addressed defense with their first pick, but now they're going to look to replace the recently retired Marshawn Lynch. And Jacobs might not be a star, but he's going to be a fun guy to watch, and he's not going to be someone defenses are going to enjoy tackling. At 25, I have the Eagles picking up Jonathan Abram from Mississippi State, a safety to help retool a changing Eagles secondary. Abram looks like a guy that could stabilize things back there, and he's a tone setter. He's a hard hitter, and he's going to be an authoritative figure on that defense for years to come. At 26, I have the Colts taking Jeffrey Simmons, also from Mississippi State, so back-to-back Bulldogs taken here. A talented and athletic defensive lineman. Simmons' stock fell due to an assault charge in 2016 and a torn ACL he suffered last year. But when healthy, all indications are that he's one of the most talented interior defensive linemen available in this draft. So when he falls to 26, the Colts are going to say, yeah, we'll take that guy. We'll take it, you know? The Raiders' final first-round pick at 27, they're going to pick a tight end to replace Jared Cook in free agency, and that is Noah Fant. The bookend to T.J. Hawkinson at Iowa. I think he'll be a solid replacement and a seam buster in Oakland. At 28, the Chargers could trade out, but I have them taking Dexter Lawrence, the defensive tackle from Clemson, the third of the four starters from Clemson's feared defensive line last year. The Chargers are going to look to transform their defense into a bigger and more physical unit. Nobody was bigger than Clemson's Dexter Lawrence at 6'4" and 350 pounds, and he was one of the most physical players around. He'll be hard to move no matter what. The Seahawks, who pick again, this time from their Kansas City Chiefs trade for Frank Clark, I have them taking safeties Chauncey Gardner-Johnson from Florida, a versatile safety, single high or a slot corner. The Seahawks will continue to try to create a new age Legion of Boom, and Gardner-Johnson's playmaking ability is reminiscent to me of the now departed Earl Thomas. At pick 30, I have the Green Bay Packers taking safety Nazir Adderley from Delaware. They decided to load up on defense in the first round, taking the D1 FCS Adderley to solidify the back end of a young and quickly improving defense. At pick 31, I have the Los Angeles Rams selecting DeAndre Baker, the cornerback from Georgia. The Rams got torched all year on defense, and they're going to have to get better as far as defending the pass, so they're going to add this athletic freak in DeAndre Baker, and he's been a polarizing prospect from the get-go, but he'll find a good home in Los Angeles. And wrapping up the first round, I have the Patriots taking defensive tackle Jerry Tillery, a Patriots-like move. This guy is a versatile multiple front defensive lineman, and he'll fit right in with the New England Patriots. So that was pick 32, and that was round 1, pick 1 through 32. The entire first round I have mocked. Let's see if I can do better than the 3 picks I got right last year, which apparently was a lot. From what I understand. So I'm not anticipating getting many right this year, so I'm prepared for disappointment. But in any case, let's move on to my second mock draft. Let's talk about who the Steelers are going to be taking with their 7 picks. And I know I already alluded to who their first pick is going to be, but let me elaborate a little bit on it. It's Greedy Williams at number 20 overall, the LSU cornerback. Look, I just have a very difficult time believing that Devin Bush is going to be on the board when the Steelers select at 20 without a trade anyways. I'm assuming the Steelers will take Greedy Williams, and I already mentioned that he's different than what the Steelers typically look at, but he won't have to start right away either, which the Steelers seem to prefer based on the last time Kevin Colbert spoke to the media. I don't love it, but I can live with it. I would expect Williams to be preferred over Washington's Byron Murphy just because Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert were at Williams Pro Day. That's usually a pretty good indicator of where the first-round pick will come from. Williams, I think, could be a good corner for a long time in this league, but he needs to hone his game a little bit, become a better tackler, and on top of that, being a better big deep ball defender. He tends to clutch and grab a lot, especially the further down the field you get, and he doesn't look for the ball, so that's something that's got to get corrected quickly. Second round pick, I have the Steelers going with Darnell Savage, and I know he could actually be the Steelers' first round pick, but I'm going to have him going in the second round. I think he will fall. So since we didn't look at him, Austin and I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Darnell Savage from Maryland. All right. So he was a former All-Big Ten selection twice and has 8 career collegiate interceptions. The pros that I looked at, he was fast, athletic. He's got great movement. It's fluid. He's good at man coverage in the slot. He's an anticipatory route jumper. He has 2 career pick sixes. He's a downhill run defender, and he's a good tackler in open space. And he has a high motor. I like high motor guys. What's not good about him, though, he's a little undersized. He's unable to match up with big tight ends because of this, and he struggles in covering multiple downfield targets at once. He'll stop running his feet when he's engaged with a ball carrier, and his open field tackling success that was seen in college, that could be tougher to come by again because he is a smaller guy in the NFL. We saw that happen with Shamarko Thomas. Now, Savage is a more talented player, but still, something to look out for. Savage was a high spark guy with good versatility and ability, but size concerns will push him down the boards a bit. If he's around in the second round, based on how interested the Steelers seem to be in him, I would be happy to have him taken with the second round pick as a guy that could potentially replace Sean Davis for the second time. As Austin already alluded to in the last podcast, he replaced Sean Davis at Maryland and could do so again at the pro level with the Steelers. With the first of 2 third-round picks, I'm going to have the Steelers taking Miles Boykin, the wide receiver from Notre Dame, and another guy that, again, if you're going to have 2 wide receivers going to the Steelers, if it's not David Sills, it should be Miles Boykin. Boykin's likely going to cost more, but he's got more upside than Sills. He checks most of the boxes and what the Steelers look for with receivers, too. And not to mention, you just look at him. He's fast, he's 6'5", he's athletic. That's good to see. His lack of production outside his senior season is a concern, though. That means that he's a raw guy, and playing most of his time in his collegiate career, my goodness, came in his senior season. He's got more question marks, but I like the upside here. I think he could be a solid X or even a Z receiver in this offense for years to come. With the second third-round pick, this is pick 83 now, I have the Steelers taking David Long Jr. from West Virginia. Look, with Devin Bush gone, I think he will be, I feel that David Long would be a very good consolation prize. Ideally, he'd immediately replace L.J. Ford as a passing down coverage linebacker. Now, he does need to clean up his play a bit. He ends up out of position too often. He misses tackles, but he has good upside, and he might be a reach here, but I think he could be a diamond in the rough. And even if he isn't a great player, he should be a really good special teams player. But again, that is usually not why you draft guys in the third round. So I have a guy falling to the Steelers in the second, the Steelers reaching for a guy in the third. I'm going to have another guy falling to them in the fourth round. That is going to be running back Damian Harris. So I talked a little bit about Josh Jacobs in my full first-round mock draft earlier for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I have the Steelers taking his counterpart in Damian Harris. And yes, he should and probably will be off the board at this time. But knowing that this running back class is weaker, I think Harris could fall. He fits the Steelers' big back mold. He was productive in college, and he could play in all three downs successfully. Given that he was brought in for a visit and Steelers general manager Kevin Colbert was at his pro day, I like the possibility of Damian Harris coming to Pittsburgh in the 4th round. 5th round pick, it's going to be Foster Moreau from LSU. Look, if there's one guy that I think is most likely coming to the Steelers throughout this entire draft process, it's Foster Moreau. The interest level between him and the Steelers is very apparent, and you know the Steelers love to have good blocking tight ends, and Moreau is that. He's a great blocker, and he can immediately replace Jesse James' ability as a blocker, perhaps even be better than James was as a blocker, and it'll come at just a 5th-round price. Now, that being said, he's not much as a receiver. He's not a seam buster. He's just kind of there. He was not dynamic, and he looks just like a safety valve option, which isn't necessarily bad, but again, if Vance McDonald goes down with an injury, Moreau is probably not going to be a guy that's going to catch 5 to 10 passes a game. So, solid number 2 here. I like Foster Moreau, but again, when you're drafting this late, you're not drafting guys that are going to be full-time starters in year 1 most likely. So the first of 3 6th-round picks, I should have looked this up beforehand, but his name at pick number 175 is Hijalte Froholt from Arkansas, an offensive lineman, mostly a center and a guard. So Froholt is from Denmark, a former foreign exchange student. It's interesting. I'm sorry. No. I won't give it away. I changed my mind. I won't give it away just yet. But anyways, Froholt. I'm sorry. Froholt was a 37-game starter over 3 years for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Again, going over his profile here, he was a versatile offensive lineman. He plays with a good pad level. He's got a low center of gravity. He's quick. He's a good puller. He has good blitz recognition. He's strong. He has a strong counter against bull rushers up the middle. He climbs well to the second level and played really well against Quinnen Williams from Alabama, a guy who many consider to be the best player in this year's draft. The cons about Froholt, though, he's lacking upper body strength. He wins the early part of the battle between him and a defensive lineman, but he loses the battle the rest of the way, typically. He doesn't finish well often enough. His hand placement is just atrocious, and sub-package speed rushers will give him fits. So the verdict on Froholt, he's got decent strength. He could play center or guard. That's nice, but he's not technically sound enough to start right away. But that could improve with coaching. He needs to become a bit quicker if he wants to become a starter. Not an impossibility, but he needs work. He projects as a solid backup interior guy who could be a low to mid-level starter someday. So I like this pick with the Steelers' first 6th-round selection addressing offensive line for the first time in the draft. So what I was kind of weighing with a moment ago was I just realized that Froholt is from Denmark, the country, and my second 6th-round pick at 192nd overall, his name is Steven Denmark, which, I don't know, I guess that's kind of stupid, but I just kind of made the realization. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But anyways, Denmark, you probably haven't heard his name because he's from Valdosta State, and if you don't know what that is, I wouldn't blame you. I didn't either. Valdosta State is a Division II college. I'm not entirely certain when the last time the Steelers drafted a Division II college football player, but that's something that's worth checking out. But in any case, Valdosta State is it's located in Georgia. So that's just a little bit about that. But anyways, Denmark himself. Listen, tell me if you've heard this before. 2 years ago was converted from wide receiver to cornerback. Any names sound familiar? It should be Brian Allen. A guy who runs a 4.46 40 time, a former track and field star, and a former first-team all-conference pick. Both years he was a cornerback with 7 career interceptions. So what do you notice about Denmark right away? He's 6'4" and 220 pounds. At cornerback, not receiver. That's huge. He's a great athlete, too. He's got fantastic movement for someone that big, and his length is used as an overwhelming strength on defense. He's sticky in coverage, and he plays with good responsibility to his assignments. He's got great ball skills as a former wide receiver, and he's a willing and able run defender. And he's a hard hitter for someone that didn't play defense until 2 years ago. Unfortunately, though, when you've got a guy being picked this late, there's going to be a good amount of cons with his play. He just doesn't understand zone defense. He gets caught peering into the backfield too often, and he doesn't take good angles. His route play and recognition is understandably poor. He also never played in the slot. Mesh concepts and other pick plays will almost always wash him out of the play. He doesn't know how to get through traffic. And when you're playing at a Division II school, questions about how he's going to play against better competition are quite obviously legitimate in these cases. With the final 6th round pick, I have the Steelers taking a kicker. Yes, I have them taking a specialist in Cole Tracy from LSU. I looked at Tracy long ago in this process, but look, when you have 10 draft picks, I just don't see how you can go through all 10 of them without taking one specialist. That's usually when you have extra picks to play with, that's when you go get one of these guys. We already know about Chris Boswell's struggles from last year, so why not take a kicker? And I think Cole Tracy could be a guy in play, given the fact that Tomlin and Colbert were at his pro day. And he doesn't have the biggest leg, no, but he was clutch, and he was very accurate at both LSU and Assumption College throughout his career. My final pick, I have Andrew Van Ginkel from Wisconsin, another Wisconsin boy, this time playing on the edge of the Badgers defense. He was another guy brought in for a pre-draft visit, and the interest is apparent. He's a solid athlete, and he has a high motor on the outside, but he's just not strong enough right now. He does have a bit of upside, though. He is a late-round target, possibly a priority undrafted free agent for the Steelers as well. What you really like from him, though, is his ability to be a core special teams player, as you usually look for in these late-round draft picks. Van Ginkel can definitely help out in this aspect. So that wraps up my mock draft, if you will. My 7-round mock draft for the Steelers, and obviously from before, my entire first-round mock draft, and you heard about Austin's mock draft today. So we got a lot in today. So now that we're wrapping up the pre-draft process with the NFL draft set to begin in about 8 hours, I just wanted to say thank you all for tuning in, as always. We always appreciate your listening and your support of the podcast, and we love doing this, but just wanted to say thank you throughout this process, and we'll be back to talk about the recap of the draft. Not sure if we'll do day 1, 2, and 3 like we did last year, but obviously we'll be on sometime before the start of next week to talk about the recap of the NFL draft for the Steelers. One last thing, want to give a huge shout out to Diluted Yinzer on YouTube. He did a great job. He was instrumental all throughout this process for many people, myself included, and Austin as well. He started making videos last May of a bunch of different prospects. He would cut up videos of every play these guys were in for certain games. So a lot of times when Austin and I were watching tape, we were watching videos he cut up and put together. He has spent countless hours editing and exporting videos for our betterment, for helping us better understand who the Steelers are looking at in these guys in particular and how good they are, what they do well and what they don't. So a lot of what we did this year is thanks to him. So I want to give a huge shout out to him. Diluted Yinzer on YouTube. If you don't know who he is, if you haven't subscribed to him, I'd highly recommend it. And he posted a message yesterday saying that he's going to be posting his last video of the draft class for this year today, and he'll be moving on to the 2020 class in the very near future. So only more great things to come from him. So thank you very much, Diluted Yinzer. We really appreciate your support and your help for all of us Steelers fans and really football fans in general, because what you've done is a great service. So thank you very much. And with that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode. As always, want to thank you for joining us on the Stronger Than Steel podcast. And the next time we talk, we'll be talking about at least the Steelers' first-round pick, if not more. So a lot to be excited about. And as always, if you have any questions you want to have answered on our show, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. And as always, check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. As always, thank you for listening, and enjoy the draft tonight. Take care, everybody.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.